Jordan's rapidly growing population reached 9.6 million in 2016, a figure which includes a significant number of Syrian refugees and migrant workers. Despite the country's high unemployment rate and low economic growth, Jordan's labour market includes many non-Jordanian workers, employed mainly in low-skilled occupations. According to recent estimates, there are 1.4 million non-Jordanians currently working in the kingdom, about the same as the number of employed Jordanians. The recent influx of Syrian refugees has piled further pressure onto an already stretched economy. To prevent a lost generation, the government of Jordan has committed to allowing job opportunities for 200,000 of these refugees. How can Jordan increase employment amongst its citizens? How can Syrian refugees be incorporated into the labour market without displacing Jordanians? How can the government ensure decent working conditions for all workers? A new ILO study, based on comprehensive primary data gathered in the fall of 2016, looks at ways to address these challenges. The study found potential to increase employment amongst Jordanians in all sectors, provided the conditions are right. These conditions include being paid on time, being paid for overtime work, having sustainable working hours, using skills rather than heavy manual labour, and having the opportunity to advance in their career. However, these conditions do not match those experienced by migrant workers and refugees. The study found that many non-Jordanians experience late payments, are not paid for overtime work very long hours, and do heavy manual labour. Ensuring good working conditions is a challenge with limited resources, and when labour inspectors are also expected to catch workers who don't have work permits. Employers say they want to hire Jordanians, yet with migrant workers and refugees willing to work under harsher conditions for less pay, it becomes difficult for Jordanians to compete for jobs. Regulations for non-Jordanian workers were put in place to monitor and control their entry into the labour market. Under the current sponsorship system, employers are supposed to act as sponsors for non-Jordanian workers, paying for their transportation, work permit fees and other recruitment costs. Employers are also supposed to provide full-time work under a contract, valid for at least 1 year. But over time, a divide has developed between the principles of the system and the reality on the ground. Out of the 1.4 million non-Jordanian workers, only about 315,000 have work permits, and many of those are obtained through the black market, forcing workers to pay their own work permit costs, along with a hefty fee to a Jordanian who on paper acts as a sponsor but has no job to offer. It doesn't guarantee work, but at least it allows them to look for work without being too worried about being caught. Why are so many non-Jordanians falling through the cracks of this system? One reason is that employers' needs have changed over time. In construction, for example, contractors may only need a worker for a few weeks or months, not the full year required to get a work permit, while agricultural work is seasonal in nature. Unlike migrant workers, Syrians arrived as refugees without a sponsor and only joined the informal sector when their savings ran out. Also, unlike migrant workers, Syrians have their families with them. This means they need to balance work with household responsibilities and that they spend their income inside of Jordan. The consequences. In addition to loss of control over the size and conditions of a labour market, the government isn't capturing the revenue it could from employer-paid work permits. Some employers argue that the current work permit system is not consistent with their needs and does not take full advantage of the existing workforce. Both Jordanian and non-Jordanian workers feel vulnerable to poor working conditions, and Jordanians are forced to compete in a growing informal labour market. What can be done to improve the situation? The ILO study proposes a number of recommendations. Improving working conditions across the board will not only benefit non-Jordanian workers, but will encourage Jordanians to compete for available jobs. This could be done through addressing late payments through an electronic wage payment system, revising and enforcing regulations related to overtime payments, and properly equipping labour inspectors to better check working conditions in all relevant sectors. Encouraging social dialogue between Jordanian workers and their employers is vital in attracting more Jordanians into jobs. Employer-worker committees can also be created to identify concerns and common interests, complemented with training for supervisors and workers, rethinking the system for immigration and work permits for non-Jordanians by adopting a model where work permits are issued directly to workers who are already in the country. This would allow workers to become directly responsible for their permits and address employers' needs for short-term workers. And with no immediate sign of a resolution to the conflict in Syria, it's important to incorporate Syrians into Jordan's labour market in such a way that would contribute to the country's overall economy while upholding decent working conditions. Programs that certify the existing skills of refugees and match them with appropriate training and employment opportunities are important. Developing ways to allow self-employed Syrians to work formally is also vital. The suggested solutions might appear costly in the short run, but this is far outweighed by the long-term benefits for everyone in Jordan's labour market.